The morning Slade knocked on the bedroom door at 6 o'clock. Corin Parrish was already awake. She had been awake since 4. Sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark with her back straight and her hands flat on her knees and her eyes on the wall in front of her. Not thinking, just waiting. Because there is a kind of knowing that lives below the mind and the body in the places the body stores everything it cannot afford to say out loud. And Corin's body had been storing this knowing for 3 weeks. She heard him in the kitchen first, then the hallway, then the silence right outside the door that was worse than the footsteps. The knock came. 2 hard raps. Nothing after. She stood up. She opened the door before he could knock again. Slade was in his work boots already. Canvas jacket. The stillness of a man who had decided something the night before and had slept well once the decision was made. He was holding 2 black trash bags. The kind with the yellow drawstring ties. The kind you bought in bulk at the dollar store because you expected to use a lot of them. He dropped both bags on the floor between them without crossing the threshold. "Out by noon," he said. "Both of you. I don't want a scene in front of your mother." Then he turned and walked back down the hall. His boots made the floorboards creak in a specific pattern she had memorized over 2 years. She stood in the doorway and listened to the pattern until it stopped at the kitchen. She looked at the bags on the floor. She looked at Lucy still asleep in the bed behind her. 7 years old. The stuffed rabbit Mr. Pennywhistle pressed against her cheek. One sock on one sock somewhere under the covers where it had been since Tuesday. Her hair tangled on the left side from sleeping on it. Corin did not go back to bed. She stood in the doorway for another few seconds, and then she walked to the kitchen. Greta was at the sink. Her hands were in the water. The water had been in the basin for a while from the temperature, and the thing about the water was that there were no dishes in it. There were no dishes in the basin. The dishes were all dry in the rack to the left, had been dry since last night. But Greta stood at the sink with both hands submerged in cooling water that had nothing to clean. Corin stood at the kitchen door. She watched her mother's shoulders, the set of them, the angle of a person who has decided that if she does not turn around, then this moment is not fully happening. 1 second, 2, 3. Greta's shoulders moved a 1/4 inch. A small involuntary thing, like a word that almost made it out before being swallowed back. Then they went still again. That was all. That was the closest thing to a goodbye that Corin Parrish got from the woman who had given birth to her. A 1/4 inch of shoulder movement in a kitchen that smelled like old coffee, and the staleness of a house where the windows had not been opened all autumn. She went back to the bedroom. She packed in silence. The 2 trash bags were not full when she was done. That was the thing that stayed with her later. She was 32 years old, and everything she and her daughter owned did not fill 2 black trash bags with the yellow drawstring ties. A handful of jeans, Lucy's school sweater with the cuffs already coming loose from where Lucy chewed them when she was thinking. Mr. Pennywhistle. 2 pairs of Lucy's shoes, Corin's work shoes and the other pair that were not work shoes. Some books. A box of crayons Lucy kept adding to and losing individual colors from so that half the colors were missing their paper wrappers. And at the bottom of her own bag, wrapped in a shirt the way you wrapped something when you were not sure it would survive the journey of photograph. Her father, Tom Parrish, 24 years old in the picture, standing on the front porch of a house she had never been to holding a baby, in a white blanket smiling the way a man smiles when he believes he has all the time in the world. The baby was her. She knew that from Greta, who had told her in one of the 2 or 3 moments of genuine information sharing that had occurred over Corin's entire childhood. That's you and your father. He died when you were 2. There's no family on his side. She did not look carefully at what was behind her father in the photograph. Not then. She was too busy surviving to look carefully at anything. She zipped the bag. Mommy. Lucy was sitting up in bed with the quilt bunched around her waist. Hair sideways. 1 sock. Mr. Pennywhistle clutched against her collarbone with both arms. Why are there bags on the floor and... Corinne sat on the edge of the bed. She put her hand on Lucy's hair and brushed it back from her forehead with the flat of her palm. She had done this gesture 10,000 times. She would do it 10,000 more. It was the thing her hands knew to do before the rest of her had caught up. "We're going on a trip," she said. "Just you and me and Mr. Pennywhistle. A trip where—" She made her voice soft. She had learned to make her voice soft when the truth was not available, because a child could hear the breaking inside an adult's voice the way you heard a crack in ice before you felt it give. "Up north," she said. "We'll stop for pancakes on the way." Lucy considered this the way she considered everything. Eyes going still, mouth pulled to one side, the serious weight of a 7-year-old doing real calculations. "Is Grandma mad at us?" "No, baby. Grandma's not mad at us." "Is Slade mad at us?" Corinne did not answer that one. She picked Lucy up the way she had picked her up since the day she was born, one arm under the small knees and one behind the small shoulders. And she carried her daughter past Slade in the hallway and past Greta at the kitchen sink. And Greta did not turn around. The Honda was a 2003 with a dent in the rear quarter panel and a check engine light that had been on so long it had become part of the dashboard the same way furniture becomes part of a room. She buckled Lucy into the back seat. She put Mr. Pennywhistle in Lucy's lap. She shut the door the way you shut a door on something sleeping. Then she put both bags in the trunk and got behind the wheel. She sat there. Her forehead went to her knuckles on the steering wheel, and she stayed there for a moment that was not dramatic and not falling apart. Just the specific pause of someone who was about to step off solid ground and needed one more second of it under her feet. She had $312. The number was exact because she had counted it 3 times the week before sitting on the bedroom floor while Lucy was at school trying to make it stretch into something it would never be. The coffee can was behind the winter coat in the closet. The coat no longer fit. The $312 was in her jacket pocket now. She had a child in the back seat. She had half a tank of gas. She did not cry. Crying was a thing you did when you had time, and Corinne Parrish no longer had time. She had a direction, which was away. Away was the only direction that felt like anything. She started the car. She drove. The first night she parked in the back corner of a Walmart lot 2 towns over, far from the lights. She went inside with Lucy's hand in hers, and let Lucy pick out a microwavable macaroni and cheese because it was the first real choice Lucy had been given all day, and 7-year-olds needed choices the way they needed calories. They ate it on the hood of the Honda. Plastic spoons. The macaroni was the temperature of something that had been heated by a stranger's microwave in a store restroom, and then carried outside in autumn air. It was not good food. "This is the best macaroni I ever had," Lucy said. Corinne laughed. She had not laughed in 11 days. It came out a little wrong from lack of use, but it was there. Then they brushed their teeth at the gas station sink. Then Corinne folded the back seat down and laid Mr. Pennywhistle against Lucy's neck the way Lucy liked, and she sang the only lullaby she knew. She did not know where she had learned it. It was just there somewhere in the oldest part of her memory the way certain things were. The melody came without effort. The words less so, but she hummed where she did not have words, and Lucy did not notice or did not care. Lucy slept. Corinne did not. She sat in the driver's seat with her knees pulled up and her arms around them. She watched the parking lot lights. She counted what she had. Her daughter. Mr. Pennywhistle. $312 minus the macaroni and the toothpaste. A photograph of a dead man who had believed he had all the time in the world. A car with a check engine light that had crossed into being philosophical. She did not have a home. She had had one once. A studio apartment on Deering Street, just her and Lucy, before the lease went up and the new number was not a number she could make work. She had moved to Greta's. She had told herself it was temporary. 2 years is how long temporary had lasted. She did not let herself think about how it ended. Not that night. The body could only hold so many things at once. She watched the parking lot until her eyes went heavy. Then she slept a little. Not well, but a little. The second day they drove north because north felt clean. Not because she had a plan, because south and east and west had all run out of clean in the last 48 hours, and north was what was left. They ate $1 hamburgers in the car. They used the bathroom at rest stops. Lucy colored in a workbook Corinne found in the glove box and asked questions the way 7-year-olds asked questions in long chains that came back around to the same place. Mommy? Yes, baby. When are we going to the trip place? Soon, sweetheart. Where is the trip place? It's a surprise. Is it a hotel? It's better than a hotel. Is there a pool? There might be. Is there a dog? Corinne looked at her daughter in the rear-view mirror, at the small face with the smear of crayon on the chin and the eyes that were a particular shade of green she had not thought to question until recently. Maybe there's a dog, she said. We'll see when we get there. The third night they parked at a rest stop under pine trees, and Lucy cried at 3 a.m, not loudly, the quiet kind. The kind that was worse because it meant the child understood enough not to perform the crying, just the wet breathing and the small body curling smaller. Corinne pulled her into the front seat and held her. Shh, Mama's here. I miss my bed. I know, baby. Is our bed gone? A pause that she hoped did not last long enough to answer the question. We're going to have a better bed, Corinne said. I promise. She did not know if that was true, but she said it, because some promises are made to protect the present moment and worry about accuracy later. Because her daughter was 7 and it was 3 a.m, and the pines outside were making sounds in the dark, and the only thing between Lucy and all of it was her. Shh. We're okay. We're going to be okay. She said it over and over until Lucy's breathing slowed. And she did not know if she was saying it to her daughter or to herself, or to whoever might be listening if anyone was. The pines, the dark, the indifference of a rest stop at 3 a.m. Lucy slept. Corinne held her. Morning came the way mornings did, without asking. The fourth day the phone rang. She almost did not answer. She had learned that phones ringing did not mean good things. Phones ringing meant bills she could not pay, or the night manager at the Shoreline Grocery calling about a shift she had not been able to get back to, or her mother not calling, which was its own kind of sound she had learned to live with. But she answered, because she had nothing left to lose by answering, because some small stubborn part of her still believed the world owed her one call that did not end in a closed door. Is this Corinne Parrish? A man's voice. Careful. The voice of someone choosing his words the way you chose footholds on uncertain ground. This is her, Ms. Parrish. My name is Holden Kraft. I'm an attorney calling from Mill Haven, Vermont on behalf of the estate of Alden Parrish. I've been trying to reach you for the better part of 7 months. The number I had on file was disconnected. She pulled the Honda off the road. She put it in park. Her hand was very steady on the gear shift. She noticed that. She noticed it the way you notice something strange when everything else was moving. I'm sorry, she said. Who? Alden Parrish, your grandfather. He passed away in March of this year. He named you the sole beneficiary of his estate. I've been trying to locate you since the spring. The pine trees outside the windshield leaned in toward the car. Or they didn't move at all, and she was the one leaning. She could not tell which. In the back seat, Lucy was humming something to Mr. Pennywhistle. The radio was off. There was a fly moving against the inside of the windshield with the patient stupidity of flies, and Corinne watched it for 1 full second before she opened her mouth. My grandfather is dead, she said. My grandfather died before I was born. My mother told me he died before I was born. There was a pause on the other end of the line, long and careful, the kind a lawyer took when he was about to step onto ground he had thought about before reaching. Ms. Parrish Alden Parrish was 78 years old when he passed. He had been living in Mill Haven, Vermont for over 30 years. He came into my office every year for 15 years to update his will. And every single year, without exception, the first thing he asked me was whether I had been able to locate his granddaughter. Corinne's lips were moving. No sound. She tried again. He asked every year, for 15 years. The answer was always no. Your mother had moved more than once. The addresses I had for her were no longer current. The number on file was disconnected before I could reach you. She told me he was dead, Corinne said. My mother told me he died before I was born. She said there was no family on my father's side. She said, "She told you wrong, Ms. Parrish." A pause from him that held something like gentleness in it. I'm very sorry to be the one to tell you this. Your grandfather was alive until March of this year. He spoke about you in my office for 15 years. The last time he came in to sign the final version of his will, I asked him if there was anything else he wanted to add. He thought about it for a long moment, and then he said one thing. He said, "If you ever find her, tell her the mill is ready." Corinne put her hand over her mouth. Not to cry. She was behind the crying. The crying was on the other side of a door inside her, and the door was locked. And she did not have the key on her right now. She could not afford the key right now because her daughter was in the back seat. "What mill?" she said. "The property he left you. He owned a mill on the Parrish River outside Mill Haven, a historic structure from 1889. He purchased the property and the land it sits on over 30 years ago for almost nothing because the county was trying to divest it. He spent a very long time restoring it. The last 15 years in particular, he worked on it almost every day. He left it to me. He left it to you. The property, the structures, the land. Approximately 4 acres fully paid, no outstanding liens. He prepaid the property taxes through the end of next year. He was very particular about that. He said he did not want you to have to worry about that part of it when you finally arrived." She could not speak. She nodded into the phone as if he could see her nodding. In the back seat, Lucy had stopped humming. Corinne could feel her daughter watching the back of her head with the careful, still attention of a child who had learned to read a parent's body the way other children read picture books. "Ms. Parrish, are you all right?" "I'm not fine," she said, and stopped and tried again. I'm okay enough. Where is Millhaven? How do I get there?" Holdencraft gave her directions. 6 hours north on the interstate, then a state route, then a county road that narrowed and turned to gravel and then to dirt before it reached the property. He gave her the address of his office. He told her to come in whenever she was ready. He told her there was a key in a small lockbox attached to the gate post at the property entrance, and the combination was the year her father was born. She did not ask how he knew that combination would mean something to her. She understood without asking. The way you understood certain things. Alden had set that combination on purpose, so that the gate would only open to someone who knew who Tom Parrish was, who carried that name and that year as information they would have not because it was public knowledge, but because they had been told. Because someone had loved them enough to tell them. She hung up. She sat with the phone in her lap. Lucy unbuckled herself. She climbed into the front seat without being asked or told. She did not ask any questions for once. She just put her small hand on top of her mother's hand and sat there. The warmth of that palm through Corinne's skin. It was the only warm thing in the world right then. "Was that bad news, Mommy?" "No, baby. I think it was the other kind." "What other kind is there?" Corinne looked at her daughter, at the green eyes, the particular green she had grown up seeing in a mirror and not thinking about because you did not question your own eyes. They were just your eyes. "The kind," she said, "where somebody who loved you for a long time wants to give you something, even after they're gone." She squeezed the small hand once. Then she put the car in drive. The drive to Millhaven took 6 hours and 40 minutes. The suburbs thinned into farmland, and the farmland thinned into low hills, and the hills lifted into the long blue ridges of northern Vermont. The trees along the road were changing, not all at once. In slow patches starting at the crowns and working down like something was being revised from the top by a patient hand. By the time they crossed the bridge into Millhaven, it was late afternoon, and the maples along the main street were burning with red and amber, and the air through the cracked window smelled like cold water and wood smoke and the first true sharpness of a coming winter. The town was small. Not the postcard kind of small that knew it was picturesque and leaned into it. Just small, practical. A main street with a hardware store, a diner, a church with white clapboards that needed paint, a post office the size of a tool shed, a general store at the corner with a hand-lettered sign in the window. Fresh eggs daily. The kind of sign that meant what it said and did not mean anything else. Corin parked in front of the hardware store. The sign above the door said, Cade's Hardware and Supply, established 1987. The lights inside were on. She could see shelves through the window. The specific organized abundance of a hardware store that had been in place long enough to become a fixed point of the landscape. She went in with Lucy's hand in hers. A bell above the door. The smell of sawdust and machine oil and something faintly like the cedar that lined old closets. A man behind the counter looking up from a clipboard. Somewhere in his 60s. White beard trimmed close to the jaw. Flannel shirt in dark red. The face of a man who had spent decades helping strangers figure out what they needed and asking the right questions to get them there. He looked at Corinne. Then he looked at Lucy. He stopped. The clipboard came down onto the counter, slowly. The way something comes down when the hands holding it have been given different instructions by a different part of the brain. His mouth opened, and for a long moment he did not say anything. He looked at Lucy the way a person looked at something they had been waiting to see and had stopped letting themselves expect. She has Tom's eyes. Corinne looked at him. She did not know what to say. She had heard her daughter described many ways. She had never heard her described by whose eyes she carried. I'm Corin Parrish, she said. I know who you are, said Reuben Cade. I've known who you were going to be since before you were born. Tom Parrish was my best friend's boy. I held him the week he was born. I watched him grow up in this town. And those eyes... He stopped, looked at Lucy again. Those are his eyes, no question about it. Lucy looked up at him with the serious, evaluating attention of a child taking the measure of an adult. I'm Lucy, she said. I know that too, said Reuben. Your great-grandfather told me about you. He never met me, Lucy said. Not accusatory, just precise. The way she was about everything. No, Reuben said. He didn't. But he knew you were going to exist. He was very certain about that. He came around the counter. He did not try to hug anyone. He stood in front of Corinne with his hands at his sides and his eyes steady, and the look of a man doing his best to deliver large information carefully. Your grandfather sat on that stool right there every Saturday morning for 40 years, he said. We drank coffee together. We talked. He was a man who did not talk easily, Alden. But on Saturday mornings he talked. A pause. The last 15 years. He talked about you every single Saturday. Not sometimes. Every one. Corinne's throat was doing something she needed it to stop doing. He came in one morning about 12 years back, Reuben said. Sat down and told me he had made a decision. He was going to restore the mill properly. Not patch it. Restore it. He'd owned the property since Tom was young, since before you were born. The old structure was there, but it was barely standing. He said, I'm going to build something she can walk into, something that doesn't need explaining. He paused. I asked him how long he thought it would take. He said as long as it takes. He said he wasn't in a hurry because the person he was building it for wasn't coming until she was ready. Corinne pressed her lips together. She did not trust what she would say if she opened them. He carved something for you, Reuben said. He turned and went to the shelf behind him. He reached up and brought something down. A small wooden bird. Dark wood carved with the grain every feather line made by a knife moving slowly. A cardinal, she thought. Or close to one. The wings folded, the head slightly turned as though listening. He made this last winter. He told me to hold it until the right hands came in the door. He looked at Lucy. I think those might be the right hands. Lucy looked at the bird. She reached out very carefully with both palms up the way children reached for fragile things. Reuben placed the bird in her hands. She held it, looked at it, turned it over once. Then she pressed it against Mr. Pennywhistle the way she pressed everything important. "Thank you," she said. Very serious, very certain. "He'd be glad," Reuben said, and looked at Corinne, and the two of them understood each other without saying anything more. He drew them a map on the back of a receipt. The dirt road wound through a stand of birch trees that had gone yellow at the crown, a yellow so clean it looked painted on, and then through a stretch of hemlock that closed over the road like a tunnel. Dark and still in there. Then it opened. The clearing was larger than she expected, and at the far end of the clearing was the mill. Corinne had thought she was going to a cabin. She had formed a picture in her mind somewhere in the 6 hours of driving. A cabin, small, 1 story, maybe a porch. Something that needed some work but stood. The kind of thing a man built in his later years with his hands modest and honest. The picture dissolved. What sat at the end of that clearing on the bank of the Parish River was 3 stories of pale granite and weathered cedar, dark with age and wet with the spray from the water wheel. The wheel itself was still turning, 12 feet across or more. Old hardwood paddles worn smooth at the edges, and the river driving it at a steady, quiet rhythm that she felt through the ground before she heard it clearly through the window. A covered bridge crossed the river just upstream of the wheel, hand-built. The roof of it was shingled. The sides were wood carved along the top rail in a pattern of leaves and climbing vines, every leaf different from the last, every vine turning in a different direction. The kind of carving that could not have been done quickly. That was a record in wood of years of mornings. The main structure rose behind it. 3 floors. The bottom 2 were granite laid with the care of someone who understood that what he was building had to outlast him, had to outlast his reasons for building it. The 3rd floor was cedar dark and close-grained, with windows set into it that caught the late afternoon light and gave it back amber. There was a porch on the south face. Long. The railing carved the same as the bridge rail leaves and vines, no two the same. A single rocking chair sat at the far end of it. Corinne stopped the car. She sat with the engine running and looked at what her grandfather had built. 15 years. Not a cabin, not a weekend project. 15 years of Saturdays and mornings and whatever time a man carved out of his life to build a thing for someone he had never met and was not certain would ever come. The water wheel was turning in the river, and the sound of it came through the glass of the windows like a heartbeat, like something that had been going for a long time and intended to go longer. "Mommy," Lucy said. Her face was pressed against the window on her side. Mr. Pennywhistle in one arm, the carved wooden bird in the other palm. "Is that ours?" Corinne's chest did something it had not done in a very long time. It did not hurt. That was the strange part. After everything, after the 2 bags and the parking lot and the 4 days and the lies and the years, after all of it, what she felt looking at that wheel turning in that river was not pain. It was something she did not have a name for right away. Recognition, maybe. The feeling of arriving somewhere you did not know you had been going. "Yes, baby," she said. "I think it is." She turned off the engine. They got out. The air smelled like cold river water and cedar and wood smoke from somewhere, and the first sharpness of a coming frost. The sound of the wheel was steady and patient. She walked toward the bridge with Lucy's hand in hers, and their boots on the dead grass made a sound she had not heard in a long time, the specific sound of open land. The bridge was solid underfoot. The roof above it muted the light in a way that felt deliberate, intimate. The carving on the railings was even more detailed up close. She ran her free hand along it as they crossed. Each leaf was individual. She did not count them, but she knew without counting that no man had made these quickly. The front door of the mill was oak, heavy, set in a stone arch. The brass key Holden Craft had described was in a lockbox at the gatepost. The combination was the year her father was born. She entered it without hesitation. the lockbox opened. The key was heavy and old and fit the lock so precisely she felt it click home before she turned it. The door opened without a sound. Out of case, she found out later that Reuben Cade had oiled the hinges in September, that he had come up every month since Alden passed to keep the place from going wrong, that the wood stove had been set, the firewood had been stacked, the larder had been checked and restocked, that Millhaven had been quietly without announcement keeping this place ready. Inside, the smell of cedar and old wood polish and something faintly sweet. The smell of a place that had been finished and cared for but not recently lived in. The quiet of a house that had been waiting. A small entryway, then the main room. The walls were cedar warm and honey-colored in the low light. The floors were wide plank old fitted without gaps. A stone fireplace on the north wall, the mantel carved with the same leaf and vine pattern as the bridge and the porch rail. Every shelf level, every drawer fitted. Nothing crooked, nothing rough, nothing left unfinished. The windows on the west wall looked out at the river and the wheel still turning in the late afternoon light. A kitchen through the archway. A window over the sink that looked out at the cedar tree that grew close to the building on the south side. Every surface clean, every joint tight. On the kitchen table a single piece of paper, folded once, yellowed slightly at the edges in the way of paper that has been sitting in a still place for a while. Corinne picked it up. Her hands were not quite steady. She unfolded it. The handwriting was careful, old-fashioned, the kind of handwriting taught in a particular era and not taught much anymore, where every letter was formed completely before the next one started. It said, "Coffee is in the second drawer from the left. Quilts are in the cedar chest at the foot of the bed, the one on the left. There is firewood on the back porch under the canvas. The well runs a little brown for the first 10 seconds. After that, it is the cleanest water in the county has been for 30 years, and I expect it to stay that way. Make yourself at home, sweetheart. This place has always been yours. I am sorry I cannot make you a cup of coffee myself. Grandpa Alden." Corinne sat down on the floor. She did not mean to. Her knees decided before she did. She sat down on the wide plank floor of the mill her grandfather had built with his hands over 15 years, and she pressed the paper against her chest with both hands, and she made one small sound. A single sound. Not crying. Not yet. More like the sound a person makes when they have been holding their breath for a very long time, years maybe, and have finally for the first time in all those years let it out. Lucy stood beside her. She did not ask anything. She had the wooden bird in one hand and Mr. Pennywhistle in the other, and she stood next to her mother on the floor of a mill. They did not know existed 6 hours ago, and she laid her small hand on top of her mother's head, the way her mother had laid hands on her so many nights. And she stood there, while the last of the afternoon light came through the west windows and turned the whole room the color of something that had been kept warm. Outside, the water wheel turned in the parish river. It had been turning, Corinne would learn later, since Alden first got it running 11 years ago. Through every winter, through every year, without an answer to the question Holden Kraft asked for him every time he updated his will. Through every Saturday, Reuben Cade poured him a cup of coffee in that hardware store and listened to him talk about a granddaughter he had never met. It had kept turning because Alden had built it to turn, because he had built everything here to last past himself. To be ready for the moment, a woman he had never seen drove down a dirt road in Vermont with a child in the back seat and a wooden bird in the child's hands, and parked in front of something she had not known to expect, and found that it was hers, and found that it had always been. The next morning Corinne woke before the light had finished deciding what it was going to be. She lay still for a moment in the unfamiliar dark. The smell was cedar and old wood, and something faintly sweet that she was beginning to understand was simply the smell of the mill itself, of stone and timber that had been standing in this particular river valley for over 100 years. A smell that did not belong to anyone's cleaning product or anyone's air freshener, just the accumulated smell of material that had endured. Lucy was asleep beside her on the bed. The cedar chest had contained 4 quilts. They had slept under 3 of them because the night had been genuinely cold in the way of Vermont nights in October, a cold that came in at the window seams and under the door and settled into the room with the patient intention of something that had been doing this every year for a long time and knew exactly where to go. Corinne had been warm. She had not expected to be warm. She lay in the dark and listened to the river. The wheel was turning. She could hear it through the wall of the mill, the slow rhythmic percussion of old hardwood paddles in moving water. It was not a loud sound. It was the kind of sound that once you were aware of it, you could not imagine not hearing. Like a heartbeat. Like breathing. Like a thing so consistent it had stopped being a sound and started being a condition. She got up without waking Lucy. She found her way to the kitchen by the light coming through the west windows, the first gray-blue light of a morning that had not committed yet. She opened the second drawer from the left. The coffee was there. A dark roast in a sealed tin labeled in the same handwriting as the note on the table. She found the coffee maker on the counter and she made coffee, and she stood at the kitchen window with a mug that had a chip in the rim and looked out at the cedar tree growing close to the south wall. The tree was old. The bark was furrowed and gray. The branches came in close to the building in a way that suggested years of not being trimmed back, years of the building and the tree growing together into each other's space without either one giving ground. She did not know who had decided not to cut it back. She suspected it was the same person who had decided everything else here. She was on her second cup when the door opened. Not a knock. The door simply opened. The latch lifted and the hinges moved, and a woman came in with a basket in one arm and a thermos in the other hand. Short white hair, a green wool coat buttoned to the throat. The kind of face that came from a lifetime of winters and decisions, the lines in it not from worry but from use. She did not look surprised to find Corinne standing there. She looked like she had expected exactly this, which was Corinne standing at the kitchen counter with a chipped mug and the expression of someone who had slept in an unfamiliar place for the first time and was still taking the measure of it. "I'm Nesta Lorne," the woman said. She set the basket on the table. She did not extend a hand because both her hands were full, and she seemed to consider this a reasonable explanation for the absence of a handshake. "I live a quarter mile down the road. I taught your father to read in second grade and to write in third. He was left-handed and the only one in his class, and the school did not keep left-handed scissors. So I bought him a pair out of my own pocket and said nothing about it to anyone because it was not a complicated decision." She set the thermos beside the basket. "I have brought you eggs and bread and coffee that is better than what you just made in there, because I could smell yours from the road and you are using too few grounds. May I sit down?" "Please," Corinne said. Nesta Lorne sat at the kitchen table as though she had been sitting at it for decades, which Corinne would later learn was not far from the truth. She poured coffee from the thermos into Corinne's chipped mug, replacing what was in it without ceremony, and into a second mug she took down from the open shelf above the counter without asking where it was because she already knew. She kept one mug and gave one to Corinne, and she sat back in the chair. "You must be Lucy," she said. Corinne turned. Lucy was standing in the doorway to the kitchen in her socks and pajamas, Mr. Pennywhistle under one arm, and the carved wooden bird from Reuben Cade balanced in her palm. She had been there long enough that her hair had settled from sleep, and her eyes had gone to the alertness of a child conducting a silent assessment. "Yes," Lucy said. "I taught school for 38 years, Nesta said. "I am very good at not asking children questions before they are ready to answer them. So I am not going to ask you anything today. But I will tell you that your great-grandfather and I used to drink coffee together every Sunday morning for 16 years, and he talked about you at nearly every one of them. And I have 16 years of Sunday mornings inside me that belong to you whenever you want them." Lucy considered this. She tilted her head to one side. "What did he say about me?" "He said you would be curious," Nesta said. He was right. Lucy walked to the table and climbed into the chair across from Nesta and sat there with Mr. Pennywhistle in her lap and the bird in her palm and her socked feet swinging 6 inches above the floor. "He didn't know me," Lucy said. Not an accusation, a statement of a fact she was still turning over. "No," said Nesta. "He knew what he hoped. Sometimes that is enough to be right about." Nesta stayed for an hour. She showed Corin where the propane shutoff was and how the water pump primed, and where Alden had stored the extra lamp oil in the pantry, and why the pantry door needed to be lifted slightly when you closed it, or it would not latch. Practical information delivered with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone who had been keeping this knowledge in trust, and was now transferring it to the appropriate person. Before she left, she paused at the door. Alden kept a notebook, she said. He wrote things in it over many years, things he wanted to say to you. I've been keeping it at my house since he passed. She looked at Corin steadily. I don't think you're ready for it yet. I'll bring it when I think you are. You can tell me if I've misjudged. She left. Corin stood at the window and watched her go down the path toward the road. I like her, Lucy said from the table. So do I, said Corin. The morning unfolded the way mornings did in a place you did not yet know. Slowly and with many small discoveries. The window over the kitchen sink caught the morning light at an angle that turned the whole counter gold for about 20 minutes around 9 o'clock. The cedar tree on the south side made a sound in the wind that was not quite like any other tree sound she had heard. The floorboards in the hallway had a specific squeak in the third board from the bedroom door that announced every approach from that direction. She found tools in the pantry organized on a wall-mounted rack. She found supplies under the sink and a full cord of split wood on the back porch under a canvas tarp stacked with the precision of someone who had stacked wood 10,000 times and knew exactly how to make it shed water and stay dry. She found in the second-floor room that had been set up as a small study a set of shelves holding the technical manuals for every major system in the building, the water pump, the heating, the water wheel mechanism, the bridge drainage. Each manual in a labeled binder, each binder organized with tabs. He had built her an instruction set, not just the building, the documentation of the building, so that whoever came here would not have to guess, would not have to fail at something because no one had written it down. She was sitting on the floor of the study going through the binders when Lucy called from downstairs. Mommy? Not urgently. The calm of Lucy calling when she had found something rather than when she needed something. What is it, baby? Come look. She went down. Lucy was in the main room near the stone fireplace at the north end. She was standing with one small boot against the baseboard below the window looking at the wall. My foot did something, Lucy said. Corinne looked at the baseboard. It had moved. A section of it, maybe 2 feet wide, had shifted half an inch to the right along the wall. Clean and smooth. Not broken, not damaged. Slid. The way a drawer slid when it was fitted precisely and running on a hidden track. She looked at her daughter. Show me. Lucy pointed her boot at the right end of the section and nudged it. The baseboard slid another inch. Silently. Corinne knelt down. She put 2 fingers against the wood and pushed gently the way she might push something she was not certain of, and the section slid the rest of the way along its track, and behind it was a compartment, cedar-lined, 8 inches deep, maybe 24 inches wide, cut into the wall with the care you would give a thing you intended to last, with the same tongue and groove joinery as everything else in this building. Not an afterthought, not a repair. Something built in from the beginning. Inside the compartment, 3 white envelopes, each one labeled in the same steady, careful handwriting. Corinne, age 5. Corinne, age 6. Corinne, age 7. She did not reach for them right away. She sat on her heels on the floor and looked at them. 3 envelopes, her name on each one. 3 birthdays she had spent not knowing this place or this man existed. Lucy crouched down beside her. She looked at the envelopes. She looked at her mother's face with the careful attention she gave things that required it. Mommy, she said, he left you mail. Corinne's hand was already reaching for the first envelope. The paper was cool and dry. The seal was still tight the way seals stayed tight in a cedar-lined space in a dry building. She slid her thumb under the flap and it opened with the soft sound of something that had been closed a long time and was not resisting opening. Inside a birthday card. Simple. A drawing of a cake on the front, the kind of drawing that was not trying to be sophisticated. Just a cake with candles and color. On the inside of the card, one line in the same patient hand. "I hope this one reaches you, sweetheart." That was all. No explanation of what ones had not reached her. No description of where it had been sent or why it had not arrived. Just the hope stated plainly in the handwriting of a man who had put this card in an envelope and sealed it, and put it in a wall he was building for a granddaughter he could not find, because he could not trust the mail to find her either, so he had chosen the wall. The wall was more reliable than the postal service. The wall was more reliable than her mother's address. Corin pressed the card against her mouth. The door inside her, the one that had been locked since the parking lot, since the sink, and Greta's shoulders since the morning of the 2 trash bags with the yellow drawstring ties since years before that. A door that had been built up over a long time from materials she had gathered as a matter of survival. That door broke open. It did not break loudly. She made a single sound muffled against the card, and then she pressed her face into her hands and the card against her face, and she sat on the cedar floor of the mill her grandfather had built, and she let it break. Lucy put her hand on her mother's back. She did not say anything. She did not ask what was wrong, because she was old enough to understand that what was wrong was too large and too old for a question to address. She just kept her hand there, small and steady, the way her mother's hands were steady for her. After a while, Corin opened the second card. Age 6, a yellow balloon on the front. On the inside, 6 years old today. I drove past a school bus on Route 12 this morning and looked at every face in every window. None of them were yours. But I looked. I love you, sweetheart. Grandpa Alden. She looked at every face in every window. Corinne sat with that for a moment. The image of it. A man on a road in Vermont slowing his truck when a school bus went past. Looking at the faces. Looking for a child he had never seen. Going home and writing a card, and sealing it, and putting it in a wall. Third card. Age 7. A small drawing of a rabbit on the front. Lucy leaned in when she saw it. "Like Mr. Pennywhistle," she said. "Like Mr. Pennywhistle," Corinne agreed. The note was longer than the others. 7. I asked the lawyer to try again. He found a forwarding address, but it was old. I'm going to keep writing these. This house has a lot of walls. I love you. Grandpa Alden. She read that last line twice. This house has a lot of walls. Lucy had gone still beside her, listening. What does that mean, Mommy? A lot of walls. It means, Corinne said, and her voice almost held for the whole sentence, we have a lot more looking to do. She did not look that first day. She could not. Her hands were still unsteady, and the light was already going, and Lucy had not eaten anything real since the eggs Nesta had left in the basket, which Corin had cooked badly and Lucy had eaten without complaint, which was its own form of love. She made soup from a can she found in the pantry. She heated it in a saucepan over the propane stove, which lit on the second try with a clean blue flame. They ate it sitting on the hearth in front of a fire she built from the kindling in the copper bucket beside the fireplace. The kindling was dry and split clean. The fire took on the first match. This is the best soup, Lucy said. You said that about the macaroni. That was outside soup. This is fire soup. They're different. That night they slept again under the quilts and the cedar smell. Corinne lay awake for a while, listening to the wheel in the river. The sound of it was steady. It asked nothing. It just kept going. She slept. In the morning, Holden Craft called. She was on the porch with her coffee, the first good cup she had made since Nesta had corrected her ratio, watching the mist come off the river in thin white strips. The wheel was turning in the mist, and the sound of it was different in the morning than in the afternoon. Slower somehow, more deliberate. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Craft's office number. She answered. Ms. Parrish. His voice had a quality she had not heard in it before. A carefulness. The kind of careful you heard when someone was choosing words to deliver something they would rather not deliver. I received a call yesterday afternoon that I need to inform you of. From your mother. From Greta. Corinne set her coffee down on the porch railing. What did she want? She called to inquire about the estate. She indicated that she believes there may be assets or claims related to her late husband Tom Parrish that she was not informed of at the time of his death, and that she feels she may have standing to contest certain elements of Alden's will. Corinne was very still. Does she have standing? Her position has no legal merit, Kraft said. The will is clear. Alden was of sound mind and judgment documented thoroughly by 2 physicians. The property transfers cleanly to you with no conditions. There is nothing for her to contest. Then why are you calling me about it? A pause. Because she was specific, he said. About the mill. About what she's calling the value of the property, and what she says was owed to her at the time she was widowed. She used the word owed several times. She said she's consulting with an attorney. Another pause. She will not prevail. I want to be clear about that. But a challenge, even one without merit, can delay the completion of your title transfer. It can create noise. It can create expense and inconvenience. I want you to know it's possible. Corinne looked out at the river, at the wheel turning in the mist. She thought about the 2 trash bags with the yellow drawstring ties, about the parking lot and the 4 days on the road, about 3 birthday cards in a cedar-lined space behind a baseboard her daughter had found with her foot. How long could she delay it? Months, Kraft said. If she pursues it, probably not more than that. The will is solid, but months. Is there anything I need to do? Nothing right now. I'm monitoring it. I have all the documentation I need to respond if she files anything. I just wanted you to know. She thanked him and hung up. She stood on the porch for a long time after. The mist was lifting off the river. The wheel kept turning. She had known somewhere underneath the surprise and the grief and the strange particular relief of arrival that it would not be straightforward. That the same woman who had stood at a sink with her hands in cool water and not turned around would not, without some kind of action, simply allow what had been kept from Corinne to reach her. She went back inside. She found Lucy in the main room with Mr. Pennywhistle and the carved wooden bird from Reuben Cade conducting what appeared to be a systematic inspection of the lower half of every wall in the room, running her hand along the baseboards, pressing at intervals. "What are you doing?" Corinne asked. "Looking for more mail," Lucy said without looking up. Corinne watched her daughter for a moment, the small, serious face, the deliberate hands. "I'll help," she said. They found the second compartment in the afternoon. Under the kitchen sink, behind a panel that looked like every other panel in the kitchen cabinet below the counter, but that pivoted inward on a hidden hinge when Lucy pressed along the lower edge and lifted slightly, a move she had discovered on her 11th attempt at that particular panel. "Mommy," she said, in exactly the same tone as the first time. Calm, certain. The tone of someone who had found what they were looking for. 6 more envelopes. Corinne, age 8. Corinne, age 9. 10, 11, 12, 13. She laid them on the kitchen table in a row. She sat down. Lucy sat across from her with her hands folded and Mr. Pennywhistle propped against the edge of the table like a small audience. She opened them in order. Age 8. A card with a bird on it. The kind of bird that was not a specific species, but the idea of a bird. One line on the inside 8 is a number I have been waiting to see you reach. Grandpa Alden, age 9. A card with a mountain on it. 2 lines. I started the upper room this year. The cedar came from the ridge. I want you to know where everything came from. Age 10. A card with a river. The first time a bill was tucked behind the note. A $20 bill still crisp from whenever it had been placed there. The note. 10 years old today. This is the first of what I intend to put here for you for when you need it. I hope you will not need it for a long time, but I want it here if you do. Age 11. Another 20. The note. I drove past the school again on your birthday. I do this every year on this day. I am aware it is not rational. I do it anyway. Age 12. A 50. The note was longer than any of the others. Hannah, it said. She stopped. She looked at the name. Just that one word. She turned the card over, looked at the front, then back to the inside. Hannah. And then her breath came back and she read it again more carefully. And she understood. He had written the wrong name. Not her name. He had written a name and stopped and crossed through it with a single line and written Corinne above it. The crossing out was neat. The substitution was clear. He had started to write another name and corrected himself. She filed that away. A question for later. She kept reading. Corinne, I have stopped sending to your mother's address. The cards come back. The money comes back. The letters from Mr. Kraft come back. I do not know if she reads them before sending them back or does not open them at all. Either way, the result is the same. So I am putting them here. I will keep putting things here for you. I am building a place where you can find me even if I am not here when you arrive. I am sorry for that. I am sorry I cannot be here. But the walls will hold what I put in them for longer than I can stand to hold it. Come when you can. Come whenever you are ready. She read that paragraph twice, slowly. Then she put the card down on the table and looked at the remaining envelope. Age 13. She did not open it yet. She sat with her hands flat on the table and the row of envelopes and the bills, the 220s, the 50, and the words, I am building a place where you can find me, even if I am not here when you arrive. He had built this entire thing knowing he might not be alive when she got here. He had done it anyway. She thought about what that meant. The 15 years Kraft had mentioned. The 15 years of updates to a will and questions about whether a granddaughter had been found yet. 15 years of walls and envelopes and $20 bills and carved birds and carving by hand a pattern of leaves and climbing vines on a covered bridge and a porch railing, so that whoever arrived would not be walking into something plain, so that whoever arrived would see from the first step onto the bridge that this had been built by a person who was paying close attention. She opened the last envelope. Age 13. $100 bill, folded once. A note that was shorter than the one before it. 13. The lawyer says there is no current address. He will try again in the spring. The money adds up even if I cannot send it. I will keep it here. Add it when I can. By the time you find it, the number will be larger. I hope it helps with whatever you need it for when you get here. She counted the bills on the table. 320s, a 50, the 100, $210. She put her hands flat on the table and sat with that number for a long moment. It was not a large amount of money. It was at the same time exactly the amount of money she needed right now, in the specific and immediate sense of a person who had started this week with $312 and no certainty about what came next. He had not known what she would need it for. He had put it there because she would need it for something. Mommy, Lucy said, are you okay? I'm okay, baby. She opened the 13th envelope last. No card, just a note. And tucked behind the note, folded twice, another $100 bill. 13. The lawyers say there is no current address. I am building the third-floor room this year, the one that looks out over the wheel. I put cedar paneling in it because cedar is the smell that lasts. I want you to walk into that room and know something has been waiting in it for a long time. I'm getting older, but I'm not in a hurry. You will come when you come. She set the note down. She picked it back up. She went out onto the back porch. There was a maul leaning against the wall beside the woodpile. The wood was already split, but there were rounds on the ground that had not yet been touched, leftover sections from the last cord. She picked up the maul. She set the first round on the block. She split wood for an hour. She split it badly at first, glancing blows that sent chips flying sideways. She adjusted. She watched what her arms were doing and changed the angle. She got better. By the end of the hour, she was splitting clean the maul, going straight through on the first swing more often than not. Her hands were blistered on the soft part of the palms by the time she stopped. The wood was stacked in a rough pile against the porch wall. Not a neat stack. Not the kind Alden would have made, but it was there. She had done it. She went back inside. She washed her hands at the kitchen sink and looked out the window at the cedar tree. Lucy was in the main room. She had set the carved wooden bird on the floor in the center of the room and was sitting cross-legged in front of it looking at it. Mr. Pennywhistle was in her lap. "It's looking at something," Lucy said. Corin came and stood beside her. The bird was angled slightly. The carved head turned just enough to the right that the painted eye was aimed toward the far wall. The wall between the main room and what had been, when they searched it, a blank stretch of cedar paneling below the window on the east side. A wall they had gone over with their hands the day before and found nothing. Lucy stood up. She walked to the wall. She looked at it for a moment. Then she got down on her hands and knees, and she put her hands flat against the lower section of paneling, the section below the window, and she pressed. Nothing. She moved her hands 6 inches to the right. Pressed. Nothing. A foot further. Pressed. The panel moved. Not sideways this time. Inward. On a center hinge, the entire panel pivoted inward like a small door. A panel the size of a kitchen tray swinging on a hinge that made no sound. The compartment behind it was deeper than the others, 12 inches, maybe more, and it was dark inside in a way that suggested depth rather than just inches. Lucy reached in. "Be careful," Corinne said. "I'm careful," Lucy said. She brought out a box. Dark polished wood, small, the size of a paperback novel but thicker. There was a brass fitting on the side with a small key already in it. The key no longer than Lucy's thumb, the bow of it shaped in a simple oval. Lucy set it on the floor between them. She looked at the key. She looked at her mother. "Can I?" she said. "Go ahead," Corin said. Lucy took the key between her thumb and forefinger. She wound it. 3 full turns, the mechanism clicking softly with each revolution, the sound of a spring being coiled. She looked at her mother once more. Then she opened the lid. A melody began. Slow, simple, the notes coming up one at a time from the small metal comb inside the box, striking the turning drum in sequence, each note clean and round in the quiet of the mill. Corinne did not move. The melody unfolded, and she stood there on the cedar floor of the main room with her blistered hands at her sides, and her daughter kneeling on the floor with the music box open between them, and the notes kept coming. She knew this melody. She knew it the way she knew certain things without knowing how she knew them, without source, without memory of learning. It was just there in the oldest part of her, in the place the body stored things it could not afford to forget. The melody she had hummed to Lucy in parking lots and rest stops, and at 3 in the morning in a front seat while her daughter cried for her bed. The melody she sang without knowing the words, without knowing where it came from, without ever questioning it, because it was simply there the way some things simply were. She had not known what it was. She had not known it had a before. She sat down on the floor. Lucy watched her with the still attention she gave things that required it. Inside the lid of the box, burned into the wood in small letters, the kind you had to lean close to read, "For the small hands that will find me." She read it once. Then again. He had not built this for her. He had built this for Lucy. He had known in the way you knew things when you had been thinking about a person for 15 years, that whoever finally found this place might not come alone. That a woman in her 30s who had never known her family was not only a daughter and a granddaughter. She might also be a mother. And whatever she brought with her, she would bring. So he had made something for the hands she might bring. He had carved a music box and hidden it in a wall and written those words inside the lid for a great-grandchild he did not know existed. For small hands he could not picture because he did not know whose they were. And those hands had found it. And the music was the music he had sung to Tom. That was what Kraft would tell her later, and Nesta and Reuben Cade at the hardware store. The melody Alden Parrish had sung to Tom Parrish when Tom was a child in this same valley. The melody Tom had carried out of Vermont when he left, and that had somehow traveled by whatever path through whatever years, to a woman who hummed it to her daughter without knowing where it came from. She sat on the cedar floor and let the box play through to its last note. The last note hung in the room for a moment. Then it was gone. The fire in the hearth ticked. The river moved outside. The wheel turned in the water with the patience of something built to last. Lucy set the music box down on the floor between them. She looked at her mother. She did not ask what was wrong. She understood in the way she understood many things that were too large for questions that nothing was wrong. That this was a different thing. That the tears on her mother's face were not the tears from the parking lot, or the rest stop, or the morning of the trash bags. These were different. Lucy reached out and put her small hand on Corin's hand. She kept it there. "He made it for me," she said. Not a question, just processing out loud the things she had understood from reading the words in the lid. "Yes," Corin said, "before he knew I existed." "Yes." Lucy was quiet for a moment. The fire ticked. The river moved. "He was good at believing things," she said. And that was the truest thing said in that room in a long time. That evening Nesta Lorne came back. She did not knock this time either. She simply opened the door, which Corin realized she was going to have to get used to, and she came in with a casserole dish in both hands and the green wool coat unbuttoned at the throat. She set the dish on the table. She sat down. She looked at the music box on the table where Corin had placed it. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "He finished that 2 winters ago. He showed me when it was done. He played it for me once, and then he put it in the wall, and he said he was not going to play it again because it was not for him." She paused. "He told me what he burned inside the lid." "We found it," Lucy said. "I know," Nesta said. "I can see from your faces." They ate the casserole. Lucy talked. She told Nesta about Mr. Pennywhistle and about the bird Reuben Cade had given her, and about the compartments in the walls, and about the birthday cards, and about the music box, and how the music was the same as the music her mother hummed, and what it meant that the same song had traveled through 3 people across 30 years without any of them knowing it was doing that. Nesta listened with the full attention of someone who had spent decades listening to children. She nodded in the right places. She did not interrupt once. When Lucy had finished, she ate the last of her portion and looked at Nesta. "He was good at believing things," she said again, as though establishing it for a second witness. "He was," Nesta said. "It was the best thing about him and sometimes the hardest thing about him." After dinner, when Lucy had gone to bed, Nesta sat at the table with her coffee mug. She looked at Corin for a long moment. "He kept a notebook," she said. "I told you yesterday." "You said I wasn't ready yet." "I think I was wrong about that." Nesta reached into the canvas bag she had brought with the casserole. She brought out a notebook. Leather. Dark. The cover soft from years of being held, and set down and picked up again. The kind of notebook a man bought once in his life and used until it was finished. He started it 13 years ago. He wrote things in it he wanted to say to you, a few lines at a time, dated. She set it on the table between them. The handwriting gets a little shakier toward the end, but it's all legible. Corin looked at the notebook. She did not reach for it yet. "There's a name inside," she said. "In one of the cards." He started to write a different name and crossed it out. Started to write Hannah. Nesta was quiet for a moment. She looked at the table. Then she looked up. "Hannah was your grandmother," she said. "Alden's wife. She died the year after Tom did. He lost them both within 14 months. Tom in the accident. Hannah to her heart, which the doctor said was unrelated, and which Alden never believed was unrelated." She paused. "He wrote your name wrong sometimes in the early years. Caught himself. But it happened. He missed her. He missed all of them." She looked at the notebook. "He would not want you to read too much into it. He knew who he was writing to. He just sometimes arrived at the wrong name first." Corin put her hand on the notebook. The leather was warm. The way things were warm from being near a fire or from being held for a long time by hands that were alive. "Thank you," she said. Nesta stood and put on her coat and buttoned it to the throat. "He was a good man," she said at the door. "He made mistakes when he was young. He did not make them twice. The man I knew for 16 years was the man he decided to become after the worst things happened to him. That man deserved to find you. I am very glad you found each other, even if it was the long way." She was gone. The door closed behind her. Corinne sat alone at the kitchen table with the notebook in front of her. The fire in the hearth burned low. The wheel turned outside in the river. The mill held the dark of the evening around her without apology and without drama. She opened the notebook. The first page had a date. 13 years ago. November. The first line said in the careful hand she was learning to read, "Today I started writing down the things I would say to her if I could." She turned the page. She began to read. She read the notebook until after midnight. She did not mean to read all of it that night. She had told herself she would read a few pages and then put it down. But the thing about Alden Parrish's handwriting was that it was very honest, and honest things were difficult to set aside once you had started. The notebook was organized by date. 1 to 3 entries per month, sometimes more when something had happened that required the writing. The early entries were about the mill, what he was working on, what was giving him trouble, the stonework in the lower level, the wheel mechanism which he had disassembled completely and restored piece by piece with parts he found through a mill restoration supply company in New Hampshire, the covered bridge which had taken 2 full summers because he had decided to do the carving himself and had never done that kind of carving before. "I taught myself from a book at first," he wrote in the summer entry of 11 years ago. "Then I found a man in Burlington who carves furniture, who agreed to show me for a month in exchange for help on a barn he was framing. I learned enough from him to finish the rails properly. He told me I had a knack for it. I told him I had a reason for it. He seemed to understand that reasons were sufficient. Interspersed with the practical entries were the others. I drove past the school bus again this morning. I asked Mr. Kraft to try the address. He found a number. It was disconnected. I finished the 3rd floor room today. I sat in it for an hour after I put the last piece of cedar paneling in. The light comes in from the west window at about 4 in the afternoon and stays for an hour. I wanted her to have a room with an hour of good light. I think about what she might be like. Whether she is stubborn, the way Tom was stubborn from the inside out. The kind of stubborn you did not see until it was already happening. Whether she reads. Tom read constantly anything within reach. I have put books on the shelves in case she is the same way. I do not know if she has a child. I made something small in case she does. Not everything a person builds is for the person they are building it for. That last line stopped her. She read it again. Not everything a person builds is for the person they are building it for. He had written that sentence and then moved on to the next entry without elaborating, without explaining it, the way certain things were written when you were clear enough about them that you did not feel the need to expand. He had made the music box. He had put it in the wall. He had written inside the lid for the small hands that would find it. And then he had written this sentence and moved on to talking about the wheel bearings which needed replacing before the spring thaw. She read to the end. The last dated entry was 4 days before he died. March of this year. The handwriting was noticeably different from the early pages. The letters were the same letters, formed the same way, but the force behind them had changed. The pen had not pressed as hard into the paper. The mill is finished. Every joint doubled. Every system documented. The binders are on the 2nd floor shelf in the order a person would need them. I asked Mr. Kraft to do one more search in the spring. I will not be alive in the spring, but I asked him anyway because asking was still something I could do, and I did not want to stop doing the things I could do while I was still capable of them. I do not know if she will come. I believe she will come. Those 2 sentences are not in conflict. Both can be true at once. I am ready. She closed the notebook. She sat at the table for a long while after. The fire had burned to coals. Outside the river moved and the wheel turned in the dark, steady and patient, as it had been turning for years. I believe she will come. She put the notebook on the mantel above the fireplace next to the music box. She stood there for a moment looking at both of them. Then she banked the coals and went to bed. The next morning, she drove into Millhaven and went to Cade's Hardware and asked Reuben Cade if he knew whether any work was available in town. He hired her on the spot, 4 days a week. Starting the following Monday, he showed her the counter and the key-cutting machine and the paint mixing station and the particular system of organization that had been in place in this store for 35 years, and that did not need to be changed, only learned. He showed her the files and the accounts and the regular customers and what each of them usually needed. He showed her all of this with the efficiency of a man transferring something he had been waiting to transfer. "Alden worked here for about 6 years before he started on the mill full-time," he said at the end of the tour. "Counter work mostly, some deliveries. He was good at talking to people about what they actually needed, which is different from what they come in asking for." "I can learn that," Corinne said. "I know," said Reuben Cade. "You already do it. I watched you figure out what Lucy needed on the car ride over here from how she was sitting in the back seat." He paused. "That's the same skill." Lucy started school on Thursday. Millhaven Elementary, in the same building where Nesta Lorne had taught for 38 years in a second-grade classroom with a window that looked out at a maple tree that had gone completely bare by mid-October. Her teacher was a young woman who had grown up in Millhaven and come back to it the way some people did, as though the place had a line attached and could reel you in when it needed you. Lucy came home the first day with a painting of the water wheel and the information that there was a boy named Henry in her class who had a hamster, and that she intended to ask the hamster's name before the week was out. She learned it the next day. The hamster was called Biscuit. Corinne drove the 22 miles to the community college on Tuesday and Thursday evenings and sat in a workshop with 8 other students and learned to use tools she had never touched before. A planer, a jointer, a router table. She was slow and she made mistakes, and she learned from the mistakes with the same attention she brought to everything that mattered. The instructor, a retired contractor named Bill, told her after the 3rd class that she had good hands. Hands that knew how to listen to the material. "Your grandfather was the same way," he said. She did not ask how he had known. She was getting accustomed to people in Millhaven knowing things about her family that she was only now beginning to learn herself. It was disconcerting, and then gradually it was not. It was the specific texture of belonging somewhere that had been thinking about you before you arrived. The morning the car came was a Tuesday. Corinne heard it before she saw it. The sound of a vehicle on the dirt road that was wrong for the road. Too quiet, too cautious. Not the reliable rattle of Reuben's truck or the sound of Nesta's car, which Corinne had memorized by now. A careful sound. The sound of someone who was not certain of their welcome. She was on the porch with coffee when the car came around the last curve and into the clearing. Silver sedan. She did not recognize the car. She recognized the woman who got out of it. Greta. She was wearing a coat. Corinne did not know one she must have bought recently. A dark coat that fit better than the clothes Corinne remembered from the house. Her hair was pulled back. She wore sunglasses she did not need since the morning was overcast. She stood beside the car after she got out and looked at the mill. She looked at it for a long time. The way a person looked at something they had been told about or had told themselves about for years, and were now adjusting the internal picture to match the external reality. The wheel was turning in the river. The covered bridge was in front of her with its carved railing. The 3 stories of granite and cedar rose on the other side of the bridge, the west windows catching the gray morning light. She had known this existed, or she had known it existed in the way that people knew things they were trying not to know. Knowledge held at the edges of awareness and not looked at directly. She was looking at it directly now. The passenger door did not open. Through the windshield, Corinne could see a figure in the passenger seat. Arms crossed, face pointed at the phone in his hand. Slade. Greta took 2 steps toward the bridge. Then she stopped. She looked up at Corinne on the porch. Corinne did not go down the steps. She looked at her mother across the clearing for a moment. Then she looked at Slade in the passenger seat. "Tell him to go to the diner in town," she said. "There's only one. He'll find it. He can wait there." Greta opened her mouth. "You can come in," Corinne said. "He doesn't come on this bridge." A pause. A calculation happening behind Greta's eyes that Corinne recognized. The arithmetic she had watched her mother run her whole childhood. What a man would accept and what he would not. What the cost of the wrong answer was. The speed and fluency of a woman who had been running this particular calculation for so long, it had become automatic. Greta turned and walked back to the car. She spoke through the passenger window. Corinne could not hear what was said. She watched Slade's face change, watched the phone come down, watched his mouth move in the short, hard shapes of a man who is not used to being told no, watched Greta's posture. Her back stayed straight. Her chin stayed level. She said one more thing. Slade threw the door open. He got out and walked around the front of the car without looking at Corinne or the mill or anything except the space immediately in front of him. He got in the driver's side. The door slammed. Corinne heard the latch from across the clearing. The car reversed down the dirt road, turned at the wide spot by the county road, drove away. Greta stood in the clearing with her arms wrapped around herself. Corinne came down the porch steps. She stopped on the bottom step, which put her a head above her mother, and she did not mean it as a statement, but it was one anyway. "Come inside," she said. "Coffee is on." Greta followed her across the bridge without speaking. Her hand went to the carved railing without looking at it the way a hand went to something for support. She looked at the carving. She looked at it the way she had looked at everything here, like something she had not allowed herself to see until now. Inside, Lucy was at the kitchen table with a coloring page and a box of crayons. She looked up when the door opened. She looked at the woman behind her mother with the full evaluative attention she gave adults. "Mommy, is that the grandma?" Corinne's throat tightened. "That's the grandma," she said. Lucy considered Greta for the length of time it took to make a permanent decision. Then she slid off the chair. She picked up the music box from the counter where it had been sitting since breakfast. She walked across the kitchen and stopped in front of Greta and held the box up with both hands. "This is from Great-Grandpa," she said. "He made it. It says inside that he made it for the small hands that will find it. My hands found it. Do you want to hear it?" Greta looked at the box. She could not speak. She nodded. Lucy wound the small brass key 3 full turns. She lifted the lid. The melody began, slow and simple in the quiet kitchen, the notes coming up one at a time the way they always did, filling the room the way they always did, finding the places where rooms had space for sound and settling there. Greta sat down on the floor. Not slowly. Her knees simply gave. She sat down in the middle of the kitchen floor in her good coat, and she put both hands flat on the wide cedar planks on either side of her, and she listened. The tears came without sound, the kind that came from a long practice of crying without being heard, the kind a person developed over years of needing to feel something while keeping the evidence of it from the people around them. Lucy watched her. She did not let go of the music box. She stood in front of her grandmother on the floor, and she did not offer comfort, and she did not back away. She just stood there with the box and let the melody do what it was doing. When it finished, she sat down on the floor in front of Greta. She set the music box on the floor between them, so the notes were equidistant from both of them. "You can hear it again," she said, "if you want." "Thank you," Greta said. Her voice was the size of something that had been folded many times. "Great-Grandpa would like that you heard it," Lucy said. "I think." She picked up the music box and wound it again. That night, after Lucy was in bed, Greta sat at the kitchen table. She had taken off the coat she did not need to keep on, but had been keeping on. She held a mug of coffee in both hands, the way a person held something that was keeping them upright. She did not look at Corinne while she talked. She looked at the table. At the way the cedar planks met along the center seam, the joint so tight that the line between them was a line and not a gap. She talked for a long time. Corinne listened. "I kept the money," Greta said. She let that sit for a moment before she went on. "Every check he sent, every birthday, every Christmas, I cashed them. I told myself it was for you. I told myself that for a long time. It wasn't for you." She turned the mug in her hands. "It went to credit cards, Slade's truck payments, A vacation we took the year you turned 10. You remember the blue bathing suit, the one with the white stripe. I remember it. I bought that at a place near the hotel for $34. Your grandfather had sent $100 for your birthday. There was a card. I burned the card in the kitchen sink before you came home from school. I kept the $66. Put it in the gas tank. Corin's hands were still on the table, not from peace, from the deliberate stillness of someone choosing not to let the body run ahead of the mind. How much total? She said. Greta closed her eyes. I stopped counting after a while. 4,000 maybe. Could be more. In the beginning I opened the envelopes. After a while I just put them in a drawer. When the drawer got full I moved them to a shoebox. In the closet of your old bedroom. She paused. The shoebox is still there. I never threw any of them away. I don't know exactly why. I think some part of me knew there would be a day like this. I think I was keeping them for today. The fire in the hearth ticked. The address, Corinne said. You moved it. You moved it so he couldn't find me. Yes. You told me he was dead. Yes. A silence that held several different qualities at once. Weight and space and the quality of something that could not be unsaid and was not trying to be. Why? Corinne said. Greta looked at the seam in the table. Then she looked up. At Corinne. Directly for the first time since she had walked into the kitchen. Because when I looked at you, she said, I saw your father. I have looked at my daughter every day for 30 years, and I have seen my dead husband. The way you tilt your head when you are thinking. The way your hands look at work. The way you go quiet when you are angry instead of loud. All of it. Her voice was steady, but only just. And Alden's letters always had Tom in them. Tom would be proud. Tom would have wanted. Tom, Tom, Tom. Every letter. I could not read his name without losing the air in the room. I could not look at the name Alden Parrish on an envelope without needing to leave whatever room I was in. She stopped, started again. So I sent the letters back. I cashed the checks. I told you he was dead because if he was dead, I did not have to remember Tom. I did not have to be reminded every birthday and every Christmas that there had once been a family and it was gone. She put the mug down on the table. I know what that is, she said. I am not asking you to accept it as a reason. I am telling you because you deserve to know what it actually was. Not what I told myself it was. What it was. She looked at the table again. I was not protecting you from him. I was protecting myself from the memory of your father. That is the whole story. There is nothing under it. I have told you all of it. The mill was quiet around them. Outside the river moved. The wheel turned in the dark water. Corinne sat with what her mother had said. She sat with it without rushing toward what she felt about it, without needing to resolve it before it was ready to be resolved. She thought about $4,000 and 30 years of birthdays, about a man sitting at a kitchen table in a mill on a river in Vermont, writing birthday cards and putting them in envelopes and mailing them to an address that would move, that would change, that would eventually stop receiving them so that he had to put them in walls instead. She thought about the blue bathing suit with the white stripe and how she had liked it. About being told to be careful with it, not to get it dirty, that it had been expensive. She thought about Lucy on the kitchen floor in front of a woman she had never met winding the key of a music box and offering it without condition. She thought about a man who had not been able to send a letter but had built a wall instead, who had run out of ways to reach across the distance her mother had maintained and had simply built something so large and so permanent that the distance could not hold against it forever. I'm not going to tell you I forgive you tonight, Corinne said. Greta nodded, once, the nod of someone who had not expected otherwise. I'm going to think about it. That's what I can offer you right now, that I am going to think about it. She looked at her mother. He deserved better than what you gave him. I deserve better. And I'm going to think about what to do with all of that, and I'll let you know when I know. Greta's chin moved a fraction of an inch. That's more than I came here expecting, she said. It might be all you get, Corinne said. Or it might not be. I don't know yet. They sat together for another half-hour without much more being said. Corinne made more coffee and Greta drank it, and the fire burned lower, and the river kept moving outside. It was not a warm silence. It was not a cold one either. It was the silence of two people who had run out of things they were capable of saying for one night and were willing to sit in the absence of words rather than fill it with ones that were not ready. Greta left in the morning. She did not call Slade to come back for her. Corinne heard her on her phone in the early hours calling a car service from the town. She heard her in the kitchen making coffee using the right amount of grounds because Nesta had left a note on the coffee tin with the correct ratio, and it was visible to anyone who went looking. Before the car came, Greta stood at the kitchen door with her coat on. She looked at the mill around her. The cedar walls, the stone fireplace, the binders on the shelf, the music box on the mantel, the notebook beside it. "He built this all himself," she said. "Yes." "How long?" 15 years. She was quiet. "He was that kind of man," she said. "Tom was that kind of man, too. They both were." She looked at Corinne. "I could not keep you from inheriting that, no matter what else I did." The car came. Before she got in, she sent a text. "The shoebox is at the front desk of the diner on Main Street. The man behind the counter is holding it. His name is Earl. He knew your grandfather. He says hello." Then she was gone. Corinne drove into Millhaven that afternoon and went to the diner. It had a name on the sign outside, but everyone called it the diner, the way every town had a place like that, a place so established in the identity of the town that its name had become optional. Earl was behind the counter, somewhere in his 70s, a face that had been smiling for a long time and showed it. He looked at Corinne when she came through the door, and he looked at her for a long moment without speaking. Then he reached under the counter and brought out a cardboard shoebox with a lid held on by a rubber band. He put it on the counter in front of her. He held her gaze. "He used to come in every Wednesday morning," Earl said. "Sat at the counter, had the same thing every week. 2 eggs over easy whole wheat toast, black coffee. He'd be in here by 7 and out by 8. A pause. "He talked about you at every one of those Wednesdays for 13 years. I just want you to know that. He talked about you like you were a fact, like you were something that was going to happen whether or not he was around to see it." Corinne took the shoebox. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping it." "He asked me to," Earl said. That was easy. She took the box back to the mill. She sat at the kitchen table. Lucy was at Nesta's house helping with the chickens. There were 19 of them. Lucy had learned all 19 names inside the first week and could identify each bird by appearance, a skill that had impressed Nesta and delighted the birds who had no awareness of being named, but seemed to appreciate the attention regardless. Corinne took the rubber band off the shoebox. She lifted the lid. 31 envelopes. Some sealed, never opened. Some that had been opened and the card taken out and read and put back, the flap tucked in rather than resealed. Some with the original postmarks still legible, addressed to 3 different addresses over the years. The same return address on all of them, Millhaven, Vermont. She arranged them in order. She could tell the order from the postmarks and from the age of the paper, the earlier ones more yellowed at the edges. She opened them in sequence. The cards were the same kind as the ones from the walls. Simple. A drawing on the front, a few lines on the inside. The money tucked behind the note. She counted as she went. By the time she reached the 20th envelope, the total was substantial. By the 30th, it was more than she had made in 3 months at the grocery store. She counted it all at the end. She sat with the number for a while. She thought about the coffee can behind the winter coat. The coat that no longer fit. The $312 she had counted 3 times on the bedroom floor. She thought about a man who had mailed this money every year for 15 years to an address that moved, that stopped receiving it, that sent it back. Who had mailed it anyway? Who had kept mailing it and then had put it in walls when the mailing stopped working? Who had found a way to put love in walls when he could not get it through the mail? The last envelope was not from the box. It was the one Holden Kraft had mentioned to her in their first phone call, the one set aside in the estate files. He had brought it to her in their meeting at his office the week after she arrived along with the property documentation. She had not opened it that day. She had brought it home and put it on the mantel and looked at it in the evenings while she did other things and had not been ready until now. She went to the mantel and brought it to the table. It was heavier than the others. She opened it. Inside a single sheet of legal paper folded once, and behind it a document from Holden Kraft's office. Not a check, not a bill. A notification of a custodial trust established in her name as trustee for the benefit of any child or children of Corin Parish. A trust with a designated value. Administered by Kraft's office until the beneficiary reached majority. The amount was $5,000. She set the document down. She picked up the handwritten note behind it. 3 sentences. I do not know whether you have a child. I do not know whether you will. But if you do, this is for that child because no child should have to start with nothing. I have started with nothing twice in my life, and I do not recommend it. Grandpa Alden. She sat with the note for a long time. She sat until the light through the west windows changed from afternoon to early evening, the change that happened in October in Vermont, when the sun dropped behind the ridgeline and the world went from gold to gray in the space of about 4 minutes. Then she went to her bag. She found the photograph of her father, Tom Parish, at 24, standing on what she had always assumed was the front porch of some house, holding a baby, in a white blanket, smiling. She had not looked carefully at the background before. Not carefully enough. She looked now. Behind her father's left shoulder, at the edge of the frame partially blurred by shadow, a wooden paddle. Curved, worn smooth at the edge, and below it the pale, rough-cut granite of a foundation wall she now knew from touching it every day when she crossed the bridge. Her father was standing on the porch of the mill. He had been here. Tom Parish had stood on this porch at 24 years old with a newborn daughter in his arms, and someone had taken a photograph. And she was the newborn. She had been here before. She had not known it, and she could not remember it, but she had been here. Alden had been here. The 3 of them, grandfather, father, infant, in this place when she was weeks or months old. Before the accident that took Tom, before the grief that followed, before everything. She had been here and had not known it. She pressed the photograph flat on the table with both palms. She sat with it. She thought about this combination on the lockbox at the gate, the year her father was born, a combination that only meant something to someone who had been told, who had been loved enough to be given that piece of information. She had entered it without hesitating because she had known it, because her mother and all the things she had done and not done had at least given her that. The year Tom Parish was born, as though she could not bring herself to take that one thing away. She thought about the blue bathing suit. She thought about 30 years. She thought about a man who had run out of ways to send things through the mail and had built a wall instead. Had built an entire mill, had built a covered bridge with carved railings and a 3-story granite structure and a working water wheel, and had filled the walls with birthday cards for every year she had missed. The front door opened. Lucy came in with mud on both boots, and her hair wind-tangled, and the brightness in her face that Corinne had started to recognize as the brightness of a child who had been outdoors doing something real. 19 chickens, she announced. All present. Good, Corinne said. Lucy stopped. She looked at her mother at the table, at the envelopes arranged in their row, at the photograph, at the document from Kraft's office. She came to the table and climbed into the chair beside Corinne. She looked at the photograph. Is that your dad? Yes. That's a baby. That's me. Lucy looked at the photograph more closely. She tilted her head. That's the porch, she said. Yes. That's our porch. Yes. Lucy sat with that. The way she sat with things, eyes still, mouth to one side. The serious weight of a 7-year-old processing something that required actual processing. "He was here when you were a baby," she said. "He was. So were you. So was I. So you were here before and you came back." Corinne looked at her daughter. "I came back," she said. Lucy nodded, decisive, as though this confirmed something she had already believed. She slid off the chair and went to the window and looked out at the river. The wheel was turning in the early evening light. The water was dark and moving. The sky above the ridge was the color that came in October just before dark, a deep blue-green that lasted maybe 15 minutes and then was gone. "Nesta says Great-Grandpa sat on the porch every evening for a long time waiting," Lucy said. "That's right. Why didn't he just go find you?" Corinne looked at the back of her daughter's head, at the soft cowlick at the crown of it, at the way she stood when she was thinking something through weight on the left foot right heel slightly raised. "He couldn't find me," she said. "He tried. He sent letters for a long time. He asked the lawyer to look for me, but the address kept changing and the letters kept coming back." "So he built things instead." "Yes. Because building things was something he could do even when he couldn't do the other thing." Corinne was quiet for a moment. "That's right," she said. Lucy turned from the window. She picked up Mr. Pennywhistle from the counter and held him against her chest, and came and sat on the floor in front of the fireplace. She wound the music box on the hearth and lifted the lid. The melody started. The notes came up one at a time in the quiet of the mill, the way they did every evening now. It had become part of what evenings sounded like here. The river outside and the music inside and the fire. 3 months passed. The snow came in the way Nesta had said it would. Early November, the first real fall, the kind that stayed. It settled on the roof of the mill, and Corinne listened to it in the night, waiting for the weight of it, waiting for something to give. Nothing gave. The pitch of the roof shed it exactly as it was supposed to. The wheel kept turning. Snow built up on the paddles and flew off in the revolution and built up again. The river did not freeze that year, not fully, not at the mill where the current was enough to keep it moving. The pipe under the mill had been wrapped before the first frost, and did not freeze on the 8th of November, and did not freeze on any night after. Corinne worked 4 days a week at Cade's Hardware. She was slow at first and got faster. She learned the key-cutting machine and the paint mixing and which customers wanted to be talked through their problem and which ones wanted the answer and nothing more. Reuben Cade was a patient teacher who taught by proximity, by letting her watch and then do, and who corrected errors quietly and without elaboration. He gave her a key to the store at the end of the second month. He said it was because he was getting older and sometimes his knees gave him opinions in the morning that made him late. She knew it meant something else, and she did not say so, and he did not say so, and the key sat in her jacket pocket with its plain brass weight. Lucy went to school every day in boots that Nesta had sourced from somewhere. Before the snow came, boots that fit properly and had the kind of tread that would manage a Vermont winter. She came home with paintings and worksheets and daily reports on Henry's hamster biscuit, who had developed a preference for being carried rather than walking. She had 2 friends. She helped feed the 19 chickens on Saturday mornings and had named the newest arrival a small dark bird who had come through a hard molt and emerged slightly patchy and completely unbothered by it. She named the new one Alden. She informed Nesta of this decision with the certainty of someone who had thought it through and was not requesting feedback. Nesta looked at the small patchy bird for a moment and then said that she thought that was entirely appropriate. Greta called on Sunday afternoons. The calls were short. They were honest. They were not warm in any sustained way, but they were there, and there had a value that warm sometimes did not. She had sent a box of photographs in late November. Baby photographs of Corinne. Photographs of Tom with Corinne in various states of infancy. One photograph that made Corinne sit down when she found it in the box Alden at a kitchen table somewhere, a place she did not recognize, holding a baby. The baby was very small, a few weeks old at most. Alden was looking down at the baby with an expression she did not have a word for, because it was too large for any single word. The way a person looked at something they had believed in for a long time and had just seen become real. She called Holden Kraft the next day and asked. He confirmed what she had thought. The photograph was taken at a house in Burlington where Tom had been living when Corinne was born. Alden had driven down the week she arrived. He had held her for about an hour. That was all. That was the only time. She framed the photograph. She put it on the mantel between the music box and the leather notebook. She stood in front of it for a while, and then she went to make dinner. The Sunday in late January had more than a foot of snow on the ground, and the wood stove was going strong, and the mill was warm in the specific way of stone buildings with good fireplaces, a warmth that went into the walls and came back out slowly, a warmth that had memory. Corinne was sitting on the floor in front of the fire. Lucy was in her lap. They had been working on a small project together for the past week. A stool. Corinne had cut the pieces in the workshop at school and brought them home, and she and Lucy were assembling it together, Lucy's job being to sand the legs. She sanded with great determination and middling technique, leaving the grain in some places and cutting against it in others, producing a surface that was neither smooth nor rough, but something specific to itself. The stool was going to be uneven. Lucy was going to love it. She had set the sandpaper down and picked up the music box from the hearth and wound the key and opened the lid. The melody came up into the room as it did every evening, steady and patient and unchanged. Mommy. Yes, baby. When I grow up and I have a little girl. She stopped, started again with the precision of a child, making sure the question was correctly formed before releasing it. Can I give her the music box? The fire ticked. The snow came down slow and steady outside. It settled on the carved railing of the covered bridge and on the roof of the mill and on the wide stone sill of the west window. Yes, baby, you can. And can I hide things in the walls for her? Corinne looked down at the top of her daughter's head, at the soft cowlick at the crown, at the small ear pink from the warmth of the fire, at the hands that held the music box, the hands that had found it, the small hands that the lid had been made for before they existed, before anyone knew whose hands they would be. Yes, she said. You can hide things in the walls for her. Lucy was quiet for a moment. The quiet of arriving at the point of a thought. Then she'll know I loved her before she was born, she said. Corinne closed her eyes. She held her daughter. The music played through to its last note. The note hung in the room for a moment, the way the last note always did, the way it always would, and then it was gone, and what was left was the fire and the snow and the river and the wheel turning in the dark water outside. The wheel had been turning when they arrived. It had been turning every night since. It had been turning for 15 years before they came through every winter and every question and every Saturday morning at Reuben's counter and every Sunday morning at Nesta's table and every Wednesday at Earl's diner and every evening on the porch, where a man had sat in a rocking chair and looked out at the road and believed quietly and without fanfare that the person he was waiting for would one day come. That was what Alden Parish had built. Not just the mill. Not just the bridge with its carved railing. Not just the walls with their cedar-lined compartments and the envelopes and the birthday cards and the music box and the binders on the second-floor shelf. He had built something that kept going. Something that moved in the dark water whether anyone was watching or not. Something that did not stop because he stopped. Something that was still moving when the small hands found it. Lucy set the music box down on the hearth. She leaned back against her mother's chest and closed her eyes. "Mommy," she said. "Yes, baby. I'm glad we came on the trip." Outside, the snow kept coming down, slow and patient and clean. Settling onto the porch boards Alden had cut and planed and laid down himself. Settling onto the carved rail with its leaves and vines, no two leaves exactly the same. Settling onto the roof of the mill he had built for a granddaughter who did not know it existed, and for the child that granddaughter might someday bring, and for all the small hands that might come after that, in all the years the walls had left in them. Corinne held her daughter. The fire ticked, and somewhere in the walls of the mill on the Parish River there were still things to be found. Corinne was certain of it. She had stopped looking for them. She had decided, sitting on that cedar floor in the January firelight with her daughter warm against her chest, that the rest of them would be found by whoever was ready for them. By Lucy at 15, reaching into a corner she had passed 100 times. By Lucy's daughter at 7, running her small hands along a baseboard. By someone not yet born in a year, not yet arrived in a room that had been waiting since before any of them. The mill had a lot of walls. There was no hurry. There had never been any hurry. A place built by a man who waited 15 years was a place that knew how to wait a little longer.